All right, so today let's take a deep dive into something pretty interesting. It's Adobe's latest AI push with Firefly and a wave of new Photoshop updates that's hitting desktop, iPad, and even the web versions of Photoshop.
Right.
We've got a whole pile of sources here, like marketing, hype technical blog posts, help docs. But our mission here is to really cut through the noise.
Yeah.
What do these tools actually do, and should you even care?
Yeah, I think what's interesting here is Adobe's really trying to position all of these AI features as a natural evolution of Photoshop,
Okay.
not some kind of radical departure.
Right, because Photoshop has had AI features before.
Right.
But this Firefly thing seems different somehow.
Yeah, it is. It's more like a suite of AI models that are woven directly into how Photoshop works.
Okay.
So we're talking about things like generating images from text prompts,
Oh, wow.
literally typing in a cat wearing a top hat riding a bicycle, and bam, there it is.
Okay, so that's fun, but not exactly mind-blowing.
Right.
What else makes Firefly stand out?
I think the scope of the integration is pretty impressive. You know, Firefly's not just tucked away in a menu somewhere.
Right.
It's being baked into the core tools
Yeah.
across desktop, iPad, and web.
Okay.
And the functionalities are really interesting.
Okay.
Think about expanding images beyond their borders,
Right.
seamlessly adding more sky to a landscape photo,
Oh, wow.
or widening a shot for a specific layout.
So it's not just about creating wacky AI art, but actually solving practical problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting that Adobe is being very deliberate in saying that Firefly is meant to augment human creativity, not replace it.
Okay.
They're calling it creator first,
Right.
trained on Adobe stock images,
Okay.
with copyright top of mind.
So trying to reassure artists that robots aren't coming for their jobs yet?
Exactly. Promoting collaboration, not competition.
But it's not all AI, right? Our source material also mentioned some Photoshop updates that aren't directly Firefly related.
Yeah.
Any that stood out to you?
Definitely. The improved object selection tool is a big win.
Right.
Something that a lot of users rely on daily. It's now even smarter and faster.
Okay.
And they've made some really clever changes to how the remove tool works, especially on iPad.
Okay.
Even seemingly small tweaks, like being able to fine-tune how many font options you see,
Right.
show that they're focused on making Photoshop smoother and smoother for everyday use.
Yeah, I love when they sweat those little details. It
Yeah.
feels like they're actually listening to users.
It seems that way, and from a business perspective, making Photoshop more powerful and user-friendly
Yeah.
is key for attracting and keeping customers.
Okay, let's circle back to Firefly for a sec.
Right.
This distraction removal feature.
Yeah.
Honestly, it sounds a bit like magic.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah. It builds on the existing remove tool, but uses AI to automatically detect and remove those little annoyances.
Okay.
Like a stray wire in the scenic shot,
Right.
a random person walking through your carefully posed group photo.
So no more hours spent meticulously cloning things out.
That's the idea. The examples they show are quite convincing,
Wow.
even with complex backgrounds.
But isn't that kind of unsettling?
It is.
Like the power to just erase anything you don't like from a photo?
Yeah. It definitely raises some questions about what we consider real in photography.
Right.
You know, is it still a documentary medium if we can manipulate it so easily?
Yeah. If we can flawlessly remove distractions, what's stopping us from removing other imperfections? Like wrinkles, blemishes, even entire people we decide don't belong in the shot anymore.
Exactly. It's a very slippery slope, and it forces us to think about where the line is between artistry and manipulation.
Right.
What happens to the concept of photographic truth?
Heavy stuff. But it seems like Adobe is at least aware of these concerns, constantly reiterating this idea of augmenting creativity, not replacing it.
Yeah, they are. It all comes down to how these tools are used, right? They're powerful, but ultimately in the hands of the user.
So let's step back for a second. Why should someone who's not a pro designer or photographer even care about Firefly and these Photoshop updates?
Well, even if you never touch Photoshop,
Yeah.
you're still consuming visual content that's being shaped by these tools.
Right.
This is all part of a bigger shift in how we create, edit, and even perceive images.
Makes sense. Whether we realize it or not, this technology is influencing the whole visual landscape of our world.
And then there's the business side of it.
Oh, yeah.
Adobe's marketing is all about how Firefly can drive business results. You know, faster content creation, more engaging visuals, boosting productivity.
So it's not just about artistic expression, it's about the bottom line, too.
Absolutely. They're betting big that AI can help businesses create more effective content more quickly and with less effort.
Right.
And they're not alone in that.
Right.
There's a huge push across the entire tech industry to inject AI into creative tools.
So how does Firefly fit into the larger picture of AI and creativity? Is this a genuine game changer or just another flashy tool that'll be forgotten in a year?
It's too early to say for sure.
Okay.
But the speed and ease with which Firefly generates and manipulates images,
Right.
even in its current form, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it definitely feels like we're on the edge of something big here.
We are.
Mm.
And it'll be fascinating to see how these tools evolve and how creatives adapt to them.
There's one more thing from the source material that I want to touch on before we move on.
So,
Adobe mentions that Firefly is trained on Adobe stock images. Why is that significant?
well, it all comes back to the ethical considerations we were discussing earlier.
Okay.
By training Firefly on this massive library of legally obtained licensed images, they're aiming to mitigate the risk of copyright infringement.
So it's less likely to spit out images that accidentally steal someone else's work.
Exactly. It's a key differentiator from some other AI image generators that have been trained on data sets scraped from the internet,
Right.
often without regard for copyright.
That's a smart move, both legally and from a PR standpoint.
Right.
It reinforces this image of Adobe as a responsible player in the AI space.
Absolutely. They're clearly trying to position Firefly as a tool that respects creative ownership and encourages ethical use.
All right, that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into Adobe Firefly and all the new Photoshop goodness. We covered a lot of ground, but there's so much more to explore.
Yeah.
We'll be back in part 2 to dig deeper into some of the specific features and capabilities of Firefly, and we'll see how it's starting to influence other creative areas like audio and video editing.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into Adobe Firefly and the latest Photoshop updates. Before we move on, I did want to touch on one thing about this distraction removal we talked about.
You mean besides the whole, rewriting reality thing?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
But, it's not just about, erasing things from photos.
Right.
Think about the workflow implications.
Mm-hmm.
For complex edits, this could save professionals hours of tedious work.
So more time for the creative stuff, less time battling stray pixels.
Exactly. But there's also potential for folks who aren't, Photoshop masters.
Right.
Imagine being able to quickly clean up a family photo without needing years of experience.
Yeah, like democratizing good design in a way.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But that also means thinking critically about what we see online.
Right.
How do we know what's been altered and what hasn't?
Right. Our digital detective skills need to level up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But beyond distraction removal, there's a whole other side to Firefly that we need to explore.
Okay.
One feature that really caught my eye is generative fill.
Okay, refresh my memory. What was that one again?
So it lets you add new content to an image based on a text prompt.
Oh, okay.
Imagine you've got a landscape shot,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to add a specific kind of tree in the background.
Right.
You literally type in tall oak tree with fall foliage, and Firefly tries to realistically generate it, blending it into the existing scene.
Hold on. That's not just removing stuff, that's creating entirely new things within a photo.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the implications are pretty wild.
Yeah.
Think about product photography.
Okay.
Quickly mocking up different variations without a physical photo shoot.
Wow.
Or even set design for film, adding elements that would be too expensive or impractical to build.
It's like having the power of a whole art department at your fingertips.
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
But it also raises questions about how this impacts, professional photographers, designers, even visual effects artists.
Right. The classic fear of robots taking our jobs.
Right.
But Adobe keeps saying Firefly is a tool for humans, not a replacement.
They do, and I think it's on us to be thoughtful about how we use these tools.
Mm-hmm.
Do they make us lazy? Or do they free us up to be more creative in ways we haven't even thought of yet?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards cautious optimism, but let's not forget, it's not all about visuals.
Right.
Our source material also hinted at Firefly being used for audio and video editing. What's going on there?
So Adobe's experimenting with integrating Firefly into programs like Premiere Pro and After Effects.
Okay.
Imagine being able to generate background music for a video just by typing in upbeat electronic music with a retro vibe.
So no more scouring stock music libraries for hours.
Potentially.
Mm.
They're also looking at using AI to suggest edits or transitions based on your video footage. Imagine a rough cut magically turning into a polished sequence with just a few clicks.
Okay, now that sounds like it could be dangerous in the wrong hands.
It's all about intent, isn't it?
Yeah.
A tool that can speed up tedious tasks for professionals can also become a shortcut for people who prioritize speed over quality.
Right. We're back to that idea of critical thinking and media literacy being more important than ever.
Yeah.
But aside from the AI stuff, didn't we also have some non-Firefly updates to discuss?
We do. Remember we talked about Adobe making efforts to improve Photoshop's core functionality even without the AI bells and whistles.
Right, because even small tweaks can make a big difference for people who use Photoshop every day.
Exactly. That improved object selection tool we mentioned is a great example.
Right.
It's even faster and more accurate at isolating objects in an image. And for those who use Photoshop on an iPad, they made some clever changes to the remove tool. You can now just draw a loop around something to delete it, much more intuitive.
It sounds like they're really trying to streamline the whole experience.
They are.
Mhm.
And making these powerful tools more accessible can be a good thing.
Right.
It lowers the barrier to entry for folks who might have been intimidated by Photoshop before.
More people being creative can never be a bad thing, right?
In theory, no.
Mm-hmm.
But it also puts more responsibility on us as consumers to be discerning about what we see and hear online.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of technical ground,
Right.
but I think it's time to zoom out a bit.
You mean beyond the features and updates?
Exactly. What are the big questions we should be asking about all of this? Where does this leave us in terms of the future of creativity? Is this truly revolutionary or just another wave of hype that'll fade away?
Those are the questions everyone's asking, and honestly, I don't think anyone has the definitive answers yet. What's clear is that AI is changing the creative landscape, and the pace of change is only accelerating.
So how do we even begin to make sense of it all?
By talking about it, debating it, challenging assumptions, and keeping an open mind, this isn't just a tech conversation, it's a cultural one.
Right, because it's not about the tools themselves, it's about how we use them, the choices we make, the values we uphold.
Exactly, and that conversation needs to include everyone, not just the tech elite.
Well said.
Yeah.
So where to go from here? What happens in part 3 of this deep dive? So we've spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive exploring Adobe Firefly, all the new Photoshop updates.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's been kind of a whirlwind.
Yeah, for sure.
We've seen some incredible potential, but also bumped into some pretty big questions about what all this means for creativity, for jobs, for how we even perceive the world around us.
Yeah, it's a lot to process. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of new technology or the fear of what it might disrupt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, where do we go from here? How do we navigate this new landscape? Is there a way to be both excited and thoughtful about all of this?
I think there is. And it starts with recognizing that this isn't just about technology. It's about people.
Okay.
It's about the choices we make, the values we prioritize, the kind of future we want to build.
Okay, so less about the code, more about the human element. But, practically speaking, what does that even look like?
Well, for one thing, I think we need to be more intentional about how these tools are developed and deployed.
Okay.
It's not enough to just focus on what's technically possible. We also need to be asking, should we be doing this?
Yeah.
And what are the potential consequences?
So building in some ethical guardrails from the start.
Exactly. And that requires collaboration between developers, policymakers, educators, even artists and designers themselves.
So it's not just about tech companies deciding what the future looks like.
Right.
It's a much broader conversation.
It has to be. And it's a conversation that needs to be happening right now.
Right.
Not after the fact when it might be too late to course correct.
You're making this sound less like a technological problem and more like a societal one.
It is. Think about it. These tools are changing how we communicate, how we create, how we consume information. That has a ripple effect on everything.
Okay, so where do we even begin? It feels a bit overwhelming.
I think it starts with education. We need to be teaching people about AI from a young age. Not just the technical how-to, but also the critical thinking skills to understand its impact.
So not just coding, but also digital literacy ethics, the whole package.
Exactly. We need to equip people to be informed citizens of this new world, not just passive consumers.
And what about those of us who are already knee-deep in this stuff?
Yeah.
Designers, photographers, artists. How do WE adapt and thrive in this changing landscape?
I think it's about embracing the potential while staying grounded in your values.
Okay.
These tools can be incredibly powerful, but they're still just tools.
Right.
The human element, your vision, your creativity, your unique perspective, that's what makes a difference.
So it's not about fearing the technology. It's about figuring out how to use it in a way that aligns with your artistic goals and your ethics.
Precisely. And I think there's a lot of room for optimism here.
Okay.
Imagine artists collaborating with AI to create entirely new forms of art. Designers pushing the boundaries of what's possible in their fields. These tools can open up creative avenues we haven't even imagined yet.
That's a much more inspiring way to look at it. It's not just about disruption and job losses. It's about new possibilities, new forms of expression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately what makes this conversation so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
We're standing on the precipice of something truly transformative.
Mm.
And it's up to us to decide what that transformation looks like.
Well said. This deep dive has taken us to some unexpected places. We've talked about technical details, ethical dilemmas,
Yeah.
and even glimpsed into a future where AI is an integral part of the creative process.
And I think the key takeaway is that this isn't just a spectator sport.
Right.
We all have a role to play in shaping this future, whether we're developers, artists, policymakers, or just everyday citizens navigating this new world.
It's been an incredible journey, and I want to thank you for being our guide through this complex and ever-changing landscape.
The pleasure's been all mine. And I hope our listeners feel empowered to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep creating in this exciting new era.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Adobe Firefly and the future of Photoshop. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep those creative sparks flying.